Hi, I'm Katie Wells, and I will be lecturing you over finding credible sources today. This is chapter 9 in your book, pages 61 through 70, if you want to follow along. But let's just jump right in. These are going to be the key terms that you're going to be using for this chapter. You should keep these in mind. Be sure to take note of the definitions and examples that we will be going over, but yeah, just keep in mind these key terms. So I thought by starting off on how to find credible sources, let's look at what a credible source is. So when you look for sources, whether it be online or in a book or something, you should always take into consideration the final product, which will be a citation, because you should be citing all of your sources in APA style citations. So we have, and this will also be more in depth in chapter 10, but I just thought we should do a quick overview over it. But just looking at all the elements that go into the citation when you're doing your research, if whatever you're using to get the information does not have these elements available, then they're probably not a reliable source. So if you can't find the author's name or like a date published or even like a publisher or anything, it's probably not that credible of a source. So you might just want to skip it or just find something else. It is the internet, you can find anything anywhere. Just make sure that it's a credible source. And so that way you're not having to put in more work after you've already used it for evidence. So I have a kind of example or an outline right here. It's like the first little bullet that has all the colors. Those are all the elements that go into the citation, and then you should be able to just essentially go through and plug in from your citation. So this is essentially your end goal. Just keep that in mind when you go into looking for sources. So let's jump right into primary source. So when looking for sources or evidence for your speeches, there are going to be two different kinds of sources. The first source is going to be a primary source. So this provides a firsthand account or direct evidence of events, objects, or people. So this is the definition in the book. So these are just things like consider yourself. When giving speeches, you want to consider your firsthand experience and knowledge and stuff because that would be considered a primary source. Not only from your perspective, but if you also take it from another person's like firsthand experience. So like under these I have like your own consider your own personal knowledge and experience. That's a great way to start whenever you have speech topics. Just think of something that is meaningful to you or something that you already have a little bit of knowledge on, and then you can just kind of evolve through that. But a primary source would be someone's firsthand experience or knowledge. So that would be like if you experienced something and you wrote it down and put it in a book, and someone else were to use that book that you wrote over your experience as a source for something, that would be a primary source because that person is writing about the thing that you experienced through your encounters in your book. I know that seems kind of confusing, but like blogs, right? So when someone writes a blog post, that's their firsthand experience. And so if you were to go through and use somebody's blog post as evidence for something in your speech, then that would be considered a primary source. So yeah, so these are just kind of other examples and stuff that would be primary sources. Um, Further down on the last two, it says like conduct interviews and distribute surveys. Those are only if you're doing it yourself. So these are all types of sources that you could use if you're going to be conducting it or if you're getting it from someone who did it firsthand. So an interview and a survey would only really be considered a primary source if you went out and conducted these experiments and distributed these surveys. If it's somebody else that did it and then you're kind of taking it from them, like you're taking something from the research that they did or, then that would be, I guess, considered a secondary source. So a secondary source provides an analyst or commentary about things, not directly observed or created. So that's going to be everything else that's not, firsthand. So these are all works that are written after the fact, covering, explaining, or analyzing these events. So these would be a lot of books. Generally, books are secondary sources because they tend to be written about something that wasn't directly experienced by the author. So these are there are some exceptions. like autobiographies, that would be considered a primary source. And technically, so would biographies, since they typically include like firsthand information like letters and photos and stuff that you couldn't find elsewhere. So that's a huge difference. Something that you could find anywhere else is going to be probably considered a secondary source. When you can find the same information from multiple places, that's going to be considered a secondary source. But if it's firsthand information, that's a primary source. Um, so our first key term that we're going to get into is information. This is data that is presented in understandable context. So think of like blood work, or whenever you go in to see the doctor, they do all those tests on you and then they come back and they give you like a diagnosis or something. They went and took all of that data and then combined it into something that was treatable, relatable. You could actually understand what they're talking about and move forward with it, right? So that's data. Data is just, unbiased, pretty just straightforward. The second key term we're going to go over is propaganda. So propaganda is information that is presented in such a way as to provide a desired response. So although propaganda can hold some factual information, the main goal is taking information and modifying it to instill a particular attitude or emotion in efforts to gain support for a cause. So think advertisements for politicians. A lot of times they have information in there to sway you one way or the other. Or, yeah, I wrote, think military posters encouraging you to enlist. I think that was actually the example they give in the book. So, yeah, just something that is providing information in a slanted way in order to slant you. The next one we're going to go over is misinformation. So this always refers to something that is not true. While propaganda may have some truth to it, misinformation has no factual base. Misinformation is all over the internet, but refers to a lighter, less malicious side of false information. So this is just like rumors, urban legends, or old wives' tales. So these are things that aren't supposed to obviously hurt you or something. This is just things that you're kind of led to believe that aren't actually true. So if you were ever a kid and you played like Bloody Mary or whatever in the bathroom or in your room or something, where you turn off all the lights, and that would be considered misinformation because you're expecting something to happen because of these rumors or things that you've heard, and then it didn't happen, right? So our next key term is disinformation. So this is deliberately falsification of information. So this is just lies. This term just refers to deliberate lies, things that are published with the intent and knowledge that they are incorrect. So purposeful lies. Yeah, so think forged documents. This type of information thrives on the internet with the use of edited photos and documents to try to create a new and opposing narrative. The term fake news would probably fall under this category, and even some examples of clickbait. So if you guys are YouTubers or search on YouTube, watch YouTube videos, the term clickbait is on there. So it kind of draws you into the site or onto the video, hoping that you'll get something that it was advertising, and then it just, wasn't there or something, which I know that um, we've all probably been a part of that on the internet. There's lots of lies and stuff out there. So this is where we've all been waiting for, where to start your research. So the greatest place that we have currently to just start your research is probably the TTU Library website. Someone I think is going to go over this a little more in depth, or you could ask your TA. I know I'll probably go over it with mine in my section, or how to use the library website. It's actually pretty easy. You just go on this link. I provided the link on there on this site, on the slide. And you can just type anything, and that will have just like, yeah, full textbooks, like everything that you just typically probably wouldn't find on the internet. There's a lot of material and information found on this site that isn't easy to come across if you were using a typical search engine. So oftentimes libraries pay to have access to these deep web publications to take advantage of this resource. Things that can be typically found on the library portal are things like full text databases, books, ebooks, like archives, a lot of research or, papers that they make after research, analysis and stuff. So I think that this would be a great place to start if you have no idea where to start. But be critical of online information. So obviously, like Wikipedia is hard to avoid whenever you're on the internet, right? And you're researching things. And Wikipedia can't be all that bad. I know this is like such a no-no to talk about, right? Because I know in high school we were all taught stay away from Wikipedia, but if you're critical of your online information, you actually can use Wikipedia to maybe be a good place to start, because at the bottom, good Wikipedia pages will have articles there to where you can click on that will lead you to other places. So definitely could be a place to start. I would obviously be very critical of what I'm doing, and obviously just keep in mind, like we talked about at the beginning, of all the elements that go into a credible source, right? Like the author's name, date, publisher, all of that. So if you can't really find those elements, you might not even want to like just dig into the website. Just keep moving along. But similarly to the library website that we have through TTU, Google Scholar, which I provided the link there, also can provide you with some good or just some more educational resources that are just a little bit better than like, Wikipedia or something. That way you can just type in your source or whatever you're looking for, whatever you're researching into Google Scholar, or honestly the TTU library website, and a lot of similar things will pop up, just, scholarly works and stuff. But yeah, that's the end of my slideshow. I hope you guys just become critical of your sources, and just keep in mind where your sources are leading, what you're going to be doing with the sources, and make sure that they're just credible. That's the main thing, honestly. Okay, well, good luck in your speeches, and I hope you have a good time and an easier time finding credible sources.